We now call the November 7th, 2019 Legislative Committee meeting to order of the Contractor State License Board. I'm Augie Beltran. I am the committee chair. Only board members of the committee may sit at the table. Other board members who are in attendance must observe from the audience. If a quorum of the board is present, those members who are observing cannot participate in the discussion. Feliz, please take roll.
Augie Beltran. Kevin Albanese.
Here.
David De La Torre.
Here.
Dave Diaz.
Here.
Marlo Richardson has an excused absence. We have a quorum.
Thank you. So we start out with item B, public comment for items not on the agenda and future agenda item requests. This item is provided for the public pertaining to items on the agenda. Please remember the committee cannot discuss or take any action on items not listed on the agenda. The CSLB welcomes public comment on any item on the agenda. It's a CSLB's intent to ask for public comment prior to the committee taking action on any agenda item. But if for some reason we forget to ask for public comment on the agenda item, a member of the public desiring to comment on this item should raise their hand and they will be recognized. Also, to allow this committee sufficient time to conduct its scheduled business, we will be limiting public comment to 3 minutes per individual. Chief Jay, you're the timekeeper today. Are there any comments from the committee at this time? Any comments from the public at this time? We move on to agenda item C, review, discussion, and possible action to replace copies of legislative bill text with a reference to a website link in future legislative committee and board packets. Chief, what do you got?
Yeah, there are two reasons why this item is here. Number one, in September at the meeting of the board in Chico, members did discuss some ways to save money, and one of them was to reduce paper and the cost of mailing packets. But number two, when we include bill text in a packet, it's really just a snapshot in time. The text that's actually in the packet of the bill doesn't reflect what has occurred to the bill in the previous weeks, and often will not be the latest text because of the time period between publishing a packet and actually getting it before the board. For those reasons, and because it's the digital age, we're going to suggest that we include a website link to the bill text rather than stick hundreds of pages in the packet each meeting.
Any comments from the public? Any comments from the board? Are you going to put a QR code on that?
We'll talk to our IT division.
Okay. Yep.
So I just want to make sure it's clear that you will no longer have bill text in your packets, so it'll be incumbent upon the board members to look up the bills online and read them. So just be aware of that will be a workload issue for you to manage in order to be prepared for the meetings.
Just email us the bills so we have it in our possession, right? So we don't
Yes.
have to look them up?
Yes, and staff will do its due diligence to produce analysis and summaries.
Right, and the QR code will take you straight to the page. Any other public comment? There was none, but there could be some now. Anything from the board? Nothing. Good. So the chair would accept a motion to replace copies of legislative bill text with the reference to a website link in future legislative committee and board packets.
So moved.
Have a motion, a second. Once again, public, any questions? Board, any questions? Feliz, take roll, please.
Augie Beltran.
Aye.
Kevin Albanese.
Aye.
David De La Torre.
Aye.
Dave Diaz.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Item D, review, discussion, and possible action to pursue legislation to amend Business and Professions Code Section 7067.6 to authorize a registrar to accept a license renewal with the signature of a qualifier only. This legislative proposal begins on page 105 of your packet. It would modify the signature requirement for all license renewals to allow any licensed qualifier to sign a renewal on behalf of a licensed entity. Chief.
Yes. So speaking of the digital age, currently our renewals do require a wet signature. Not only that, the statute requires both the applicant for the renewal and a qualifying individual to sign it. So depending on the structure of a corporation, you would oftentimes require many signatures. That is ultimately a reason a lot of renewals are rejected and licensees are expired even when the renewal is timely because of problems with signatures. It seems reasonable to require one signature, and that would be the qualifier, the person responsible for construction operations, and do that maybe electronically as well.
So I don't know if you want to discuss the legislative proposals, and the text is on page 106, but I did have some questions about the strikeout on the second paragraph.
Yes, on page 106, you'll see the addition to the existing statute. The blue language is the addition, and the red was the proposed strike-through. Upon discussion with council, we're actually, the language as we present it to the board, if this proposal does vote through at this meeting, will not include that red strike-through, and that's because at the time when we struck this, we thought that it would be reasonable to not require the board to go through the regulatory process to get this signature requirement through. However, there are some legal requirements imposed by the Secretary of State that would actually make it more onerous for licensees if the board does not come up with its own process and regulation for dealing with the electronic signatures. So in other words, we got ahead of ourselves by striking this existing paragraph. We'll probably put it back in when we next introduce this proposal.
So just for real quick background, the proposal really is just to change the signature requirement. Staff also thought we would maybe delete the second paragraph that allowed you to develop regulations for electronic transmission of applications, including signatures. So under California State Law, Government Code Section 16.5, public entities are only allowed to accept a digital signature that meet the requirements of the Secretary of State's regulations, and they're very extensive. So years ago, our office recommended this language that's being struck so that you could come up with an alternative proposal that might be simpler and easier than the Secretary of State's regulations. And so I wouldn't recommend striking this paragraph because it would eliminate your flexibility and discretion to come up with a simpler option for electronic transmission of applications, including digital signatures. So I would suggest not doing this strike through in the second paragraph. I have no concerns with the rest of the proposal.
So as I understand it, if I remember right, any member that's listed on the license and all qualifiers have to sign it. And this is asking that only one qualifier has to sign. What if there's multiple qualifiers for different classifications?
The way that it's written now, it would be any person qualifying, so it would be any one of those qualifiers.
Yeah, I think I would have a problem with that, because if you have multiple qualifiers, so say you got a qualifier for the C8 and then one for the C50, I mean, just throwing stuff out. If they're not active enough in the business to sign an application every 2 years, then they probably shouldn't be on the license, I think. How big is this problem where these are being rejected?
Mike, if I could, I think one of the reasons why we're presenting this is because we want to provide for online renewals. As it is today, we have to have a paper copy with a check. And so this would allow us to accept it electronically with using a credit card. Tanya, you want to add to that? Because you've been taking the lead on this.
Yeah, so from an IT perspective, it's very difficult to do a transaction online where you have multiple signatures because you have to actually pin to the renewal, then it has to know where to send it to next. And so this would provide for us an easy way for us to go online and go online quickly with having a one signature requirement.
Kevin, you got more on that?
No, I'm just, I understand for that aspect, for the online aspect a bit. I'm just concerned because, you know, there is personal liability to the contractor, to the qualifier, that he or she is actively involved, monitoring the business, et cetera. And, you know, at least every 2 years, they're reaffirming their obligation to do that. And I don't want to lose that. And I just probably need to wrap my mind around it a little bit more, should this go to the full board. But I do have some concerns just about how that, and we've talked about RMO agency, we've talked about these rental, deals where, they don't even know what there's going on in the business, and to give them an excuse or an opportunity for somebody else within the business to sign that on their behalf causes me some concern.
Thank you. David Diaz.
Yeah, I understand Kevin's concerns. Do we really need this right now, or do you want to vet it more, or I'm kind of asking you, Kevin.
I'm willing, I would say study it a little bit more. I mean, at the risk of getting paralysis by analysis. I think there needs to be more of a cost benefit to, okay, I mean, if we can go online, next month or next year, and this is what needs to happen, then maybe that outweighs the other. But in as much as we still need to do the online stuff and figure that out, I feel like we'd be rushing this at this point.
Tanya?
Yes, so we are looking at the online renewal for sole owners, and we'll be able to be online for that because that requires the one signature. So what it will result is a delay moving the others with multiple signatures going forward, but not a problem to study it more and provide more data.
Anyone on this side of the dais? Anything else? Public, do you have any comments on this? It sounds like the committee wants to send it back to study. Can we bring it back to the next Ledge Committee?
Absolutely.
Unless there's somebody out there who wants to make a motion. David, did you want to say something? No, you're good? Okay. So we're going to leave it to the next, let's study it a little bit more. That keeps it timely, right? Okay. Is this something that we have to hurry up to get in front of the legislature or anything?
I don't think, we have plenty of Ledge proposals pending.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. All right. E, review, discussion, and possible action to pursue legislation to amend Business and Professions Code Section 7071.19 to provide 45 days notice period prior to suspending the license and address retroactive policy renewals. We are now on page 109 of your packet. We were pleased to learn subsequent to this posting of this agenda item that staff implemented a process whereby insurance companies may submit limited liability insurance policies electronically. It appears this process may have resolved the need for legislation. As such, we are recommending that no action be taken on this item to provide time to determine the success of the electronic filing process. Chief, you have anything to add?
Just that this is really here because in 2018, the board approved this concept in the sunset review. But like we said, we've implemented some changes. There's only 3,500 LLCs, and more than half of them submitted their certificates online. So we think we nipped this problem in the bud. Why change the law?
Counselor? Nothing? Wow. Anyone on this side of the dais have anything to say about this matter? No? Public, anything to say? Okay, tabled. In closing, we'd like to direct staff to update the committee on the success of the electronic filing process at a future legislative committee meeting. Thank you. Good job, staff. F, review, discussion, and possible action to pursue legislation to amend Business and Professions Code Section 7076.2 to increase from 30 days to 60 days for licensee to provide proof of proper registration and good standing with the Secretary of State prior to license suspension. This legislative proposal begins on page 113 of your packet. It would modify the law to provide 60 days instead of 30 for a licensee to comply with the Secretary of State requirements before the CSLB automatically suspends a license for issues with the Secretary of State standing. The board approved the concept for this proposal on September 2018 as part of the sunset review process. What do you got, Chief?
Just that this has been, it's another one of the reasons that licenses get held up. If you look on the bottom of page 113 of your packet, there's any number of issues an entity can have with Secretary of State that causes a delay, and we have found that it takes more than 30 days for those items to be resolved. But the main the main compelling aspect of this was that the Secretary of State itself provides entities 60 days to resolve certain issues with their statements of information. So we figured we would match that date and make it easier for licensees to get back into business without a suspension.
Counselor?
It's twice.
Good job. Anyone on this side of the dais? No. Public comment? Nothing. Okay. So the chair would entertain a motion to recommend to the full board pursue this legislative proposal to modify the law to provide 60 days instead of 30 days for a licensee to comply with the Secretary of State requirements before CSLB automatically suspends a license.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. On the question from this side of the dais, no questions. Public questions? Nope. Good. Thank you. Feliz?
Lucky Beltran,
Aye.
Kevin Albanese,
Aye.
David Delatorre,
Aye.
Dave Diaz,
Aye.
motion passes.
Thank you. Item G, update, discussion, and possible action to amend 2019-2021 Legislative Strategic Plan Objectives. We are now on page 117. Chief, hit it.
So the highlights on pages 117 and 118 are actually typos. The board actually in Chico did already vote to amend the dates that needed to be pushed back. So I don't have any updates on this item if there's no questions.
Sweet. Counselor? That's 3. Anyone on this side of the dais? Public? Nothing. Thank you. We now move on to item H.